The third section for top 10 list is owned and non-owned vehicles. Now, obviously, if you own a 44-passenger bus or a 15-passenger van, it's probably pretty apparent to you that you have a liability risk, or it should be. Because if there is an accident with fatalities or serious and permanent injuries, and you're carrying a variety of people on that bus to a special event or whatever, the likelihood of liability suits is very strong. And when you place liability insurance, third-party liability insurance for your bus or van, again, it's important to maximize your coverage, both under the primary coverage and also whatever available umbrella liability coverage limits you can get. In my own personal opinion, it really is foolish to operate a multi-passenger vehicle like this and not to try to carry as high a liability limits as you can get. There are certainly examples in our own clientele across Canada and in the United States of liability claims involving these vehicles in the $5, $10, $20 million range. So again, important to think about this from a liability insurance perspective. Any organization that owns vehicles, multi-passenger vehicles, should be aware of this risk. The other part of it is the non-owned vehicles. And when you think about this for a second, even if your organization doesn't own vehicles, you will have cars, minivans being used on behalf of church events and activities many, many times over in a given week. People using their own private vehicles, not just to transport their own kids, but other kids. You've got ride programs, you're facilitating ride sharing. And if there is an accident involving one of these privately owned vehicles, the primary responsibility for coverage rests with the owner of the vehicle. The first thing that says to you is if you have people in the church using their own vehicles on behalf of church activities, it is a good idea to maybe caution them or make them aware of the fact that they should be carrying high enough third-party liability coverage for their benefit and also for the benefit of the people in the cars. You can also get into a discussion about if we start as an organization sponsoring use of private vehicles. We publicize it from the pulpit, in the bulletins, our youth pastor makes ride arrangements. Whose care are we putting the kids and teenagers into? Are they safe drivers? Do they have a valid driver's license? How many years have they been driving for? Do they have careless driving charges on their record? What kind of insurance do they have? And some of these things are valid questions, and many churches do choose to have an authorized pool of drivers so that these questions have already been answered. And that's something to consider. Some of the transportation that takes place in a given week at a church, leadership doesn't even know about. However, to the degree that you do arrange transportation, it is a good idea to think about some of these risks and about safety procedures that you can put in place. Now, individuals at risk, obviously the injuries could be suffered by passengers in owned, rented, or private vehicles. And to some degree, what we're talking about is liability suits from other parties in other vehicles that you might be responsible for causing an accident. Sources of coverage, if we're talking about your owned vehicle, it would be your third-party liability coverage through your automobile insurance policy that you would arrange. If it's a non-owned vehicle, the primary coverage rests with the owner of the vehicle. Doesn't matter who you let use your vehicle. You could loan your vehicle to a friend, a neighbor. For that matter, somebody could break into your garage and go on a joyride and cause damage or injury. And if there's no other source of recovery, the owner's policy is likely going to have to respond. Beyond that, though, if the vehicle was being driven on behalf of a church or charitable function, the possibility exists that your organization is going to be sued as well. And that's where it's really important to have what's called non-owned liability insurance coverage, non-owned automobile insurance. This can be also, we have features in our policy for watercraft as well. And again, insurance tips, you do want to make sure that you're using safe, mature drivers with above average driving records. Another point to remember, and we've had a couple of these accidents in recent times, is with the issue of maintenance of vehicles. Traditionally, buses in churches are older, oftentimes 10, 15, 20 years old. These require a very regular maintenance schedule. And in fact, we recently had a bus that caught fire and completely burned. And it was only fortunate that the kids in the bus got out literally a couple of minutes before it went completely up in flames. So again, when you're thinking about your choice of vehicles and about maintenance, it's extremely important that you show a high duty of care. Otherwise, you're better off to get rid of the vehicle and just charter vehicles as you require. Avoid sponsoring transportation with drivers who are young or have unsafe driving records. Most churches will try to stipulate either that the driver has to be 21 years of age, 25 years of age, or a minimum of 5 years driving experience. The reality is that if you refer to the Insurance Bureau of Canada statistics about claims, males between the ages of 16 and 25 years of age constitute about 11% of the driving population in Canada. Okay? Let's keep that in mind. They cause about 40% of all the claims. Okay? So without judging a particular young driver, the fact is that young drivers are inexperienced, they're easily distracted, and if they're in vehicles like vans with many other young people, the rate of accidents is horrifically high. Okay? So when you're thinking about, not as a parent what you do with your own children, but as an organization, who do you allow to drive in these arrangements? It is a good idea to stipulate mature, safe drivers. And again, as I mentioned, in our program, in our Church Protection Plus program, in the general liability, there is a rider that automatically covers liability suits arising out of the use of non-owned automobiles. That's a standard feature in the program. And as mentioned, with these vehicles, it is important to look at umbrella liability coverage so you can maximize the amount of coverage you have, particularly if they're multi-passenger vehicles.